excited about AI? Who wants to hear? Who's all going to crowd into the AI room today? Okay, so I named this little talk, it's only about 10 minutes, about outsourcing meeting an inflection point. And I didn't actually refer to AI, but of course now AI is creating another inflection point for this industry, for industry generally, for employment generally. So it's interesting, like regardless of when you really look at an industry or a sector, things are really always
80%
meeting new inflection points. So it's really about evolving. And I think that's what all of us have to do in this room to stay on top of the sector that we're in. First, just defining, a lot of people in this room are maybe from the larger end of the call center sector. To me, the industry is actually quite disparate. Down the far end, you've got call centers that we're all very familiar with. They've been around about 30 years. Down the absolute other end of the spectrum, you have freelancers, you've got VAs and the gig economy, which of course people are very familiar with in the Philippines. They have been going about sort of 15 years, kind of popularized by Tim Ferriss. In the middle, you have the sort of evolution of the SME BPOs, what I refer to as the next-gen BPOs, and they are really where the growth of the market is being seen. And call centers, as we'll see, are quite mature now. It's a very mature industry. Everyone that is using call centers has been using them for a matter of decades. And there's massive growth in this SME BPO sector. So I'm going to sort of explore that a little bit now. First of all, enterprise. I'm somewhat biased by saying this. It's a little bit sort of hyperbolic, of course, but enterprise is somewhat cooked. Okay, there is 99% saturation of the enterprise market. Okay, let me explain. Enterprise naturally, so the enterprise BPOs naturally go after the enterprise clients. Okay, and it's quite staggering when you realize the number of enterprise businesses in the world. Okay, and using US as an example, I apologize about the small numbers here, but you will see that a small business, the SMEs, from less than 5 people up to 500 staff, okay, so very small companies, actually constitute 99.26% of all businesses in the US. Okay, it's pretty staggering. And that section there actually employs, you say, well, they don't employ many people, they're small businesses, who cares? Collectively, they employ about 60% of the global workforce. So in aggregate, they're actually a bigger employer than any of the enterprise. That's pretty consistent around the world. If we add in all of the extra companies here, and of course down the bottom you've got 10,000 or more, that is, I think that's wrong, but basically, if you go 5,000 and above, there is 99.9% that are outside of that. Okay, so 0.1% of businesses are actually truly enterprise. And so it's relatively slim pickings, okay? What we've found is the call center industry is now the grandfather of the industry. It's been going 30 years. It kind of happened even before there was internet. It was boosted by internet capacity. And all of the enterprises that would outsource have basically been outsourcing for about 20 to 30 years, unless you get a new Uber or a new sort of unicorn coming along. So that means that the whole market is saturated. Effectively 99% of enterprise already outsource, and they constitute about 5% of the workforce and 0.1% of companies. It's pretty staggering, huh? Also, AI is coming, and hopefully we'll get some incredible nuggets of information and learnings from this session today. I will not be giving you any. I have no idea what's going to happen with AI. There is speculation that in 5 years, maybe none of us need to be here. Maybe none of us need to be in call centers. It's really it's an inflection point but it is potentially a hugely dramatic inflection point that's about to happen with the capabilities of AI, especially in the call centers, in the roles that are high repetition, high frequency roles. AI could potentially sort of unwind this whole thing. It's pretty dramatic. Luckily, there's a bright light, okay? It's not all doom and gloom. I believe SME is the bright future. A lot of the big call centers looking after the big enterprise, they shake their heads, they don't even sort of believe that this industry exists, but it is a massive market and it is on the upward trajectory, the hockey stick. What it is really representing is global employment. And in the industry, it's referred to often as staff augmentation, okay? Call centers is more about managed solutions and output, whereas a lot of the sort of mid-range BPOs, it's more about staff augmentation. The bigger narrative around that is, of course, global employment. You see that with the VCs across Silicon Valley putting in hundreds of millions of dollars of investments into the PEOs like Deal and Remote. And you also see that, of course, in the growing movement towards remote employment generally. Okay. The reverse of the enterprise is exactly this. This is what the enterprise, the SME market represents. It represents 99.9% of companies out there. It represents about 95% of the workforce, depending on some measures. Critically, only about 1% of these businesses as of yet outsource, versus 99% of the enterprise that already outsource. So you have a massive market sitting here with relatively very little penetration, okay? And 5-10 years ago, it was not considered feasible, it was not really acceptable to go offshore, it was not normalized, and then we had COVID, and then we have the technology, and now it is becoming the norm, or a default, to employ people globally, okay? And that is a big inflection point within this industry. Why? I touched on this before, but there's 4 major reasons, okay, why this major inflection point has happened over the last few years, and this is only the beginning. 4 main reasons. Technology rails, of course, we have AWS, thank you AWS, but you know, Slack, Gmail, Zoom, all of these things that are now native to most of us, but certainly the Gen Zs, they live in a digital interface economy. And so the relevance of sort of interpersonal activity is much lower for the younger generations. Globalization, we all see that in everyday, you know, we drive foreign cars, wear foreign clothing, everything, watch Netflix, everything is globalized in terms of our behaviors. COVID, of course, has moved every workplace into a remote sort of work in some extent. Okay, a lot of businesses that never would have done remote are now doing remote. There's work from home, there's a great resignation. And of course, recession. We seem to be heading into a recession or thereabouts. People need to cut costs. Getting rid of offices, going remote, and hiring people globally is now going to be a trend for the next 2, 3, 4 years. The result of all of that is quite staggering. Across the high-cost English-speaking countries, of which there's about sort of 10, 12 to 15, there are about 40 million jobs that are likely to come offshore over the next 10 to 20 years because of these factors that mean that it's cheaper, it's now more accepted, it's less frictionless to do these things and to come offshore. To put that in context, the Philippine outsourcing industry, which is about 10 to 12% of the country's GDP, the single biggest industry, employs about 1.5 million people, okay, and it's a $25 billion industry. If another 40 million jobs come offshore, then it's about a $600 billion annual industry. It is massive. Hopefully, the Philippines can capture a lot of those 40 million. In reality, it's going to spread far and wide. It's going to go to India, it's going to go to Philippines, it's going to go to Africa, Vietnam, and all of these emerging economies. And what people are seeking out is high quality, capable staff. It's more of a staff augmentation model as opposed to a managed solutions. And it will just become almost a proxy for employment itself. So yeah, that's what, and what was I going to say? Yeah, so that's what I see as the future. The beginning of the talk is a little bit sort of doomsday, it's a little bit scary, but actually with all of this new employment, the staff augmentation model is actually resilient, highly resilient to AI, because it's developers, it's whatever, workers, marketers, things like that, instead of high repetition roles. So it is a very exciting prospect, I believe, for outsourcing going forward, and something that we could see a massive hockey stick growth from here, and something that we should all celebrate.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks, Derek.
So this is one of the anomalies of this room in AWS. It's a surprise as a presenter that the screens go up kind of randomly, so we just have to wait for them to come back down again. But